a countdown. If you'll notice my shirt, it says, don't get your tinsel in a tangle, is what my shirt says. Hold that down and let them see my, I'll just stay
Recording
here.
in progress.
Can
Okay.
you see it?
See, don't get your tinsel in a
I don't
tangle.
know. Here. There.
Yeah.
Tangle.
Right, don't get your tinsel in a tangle. This is the week, the countdown before the big day where people have put off their shopping or whatever. And so sometimes, it's, I don't have that anymore, that under pressure, because my kids are all grown and I'm old, and I mean, they're not old, but anyway, I don't have little kids to think about, other than little grandkids, but great-grands. So I wanted to talk this morning about Christmases in the past. And I want you to think about your Christmas in the past, maybe the one that wasn't the best, and maybe one that you remember that really stands out to you. The Christmases in the past. And if you lived in any kind of dysfunction, particularly alcoholism, it seems like those that are untreated alcoholics tend to celebrate more around Christmas than any other time, for whatever reason. And there could be more upsets around Christmas time than any other time of the year. And, Christmas trees being knocked over, presents thrown. I mean, disastrous things can happen in the disease of alcoholism. So I want you to think back of maybe, I don't know if it's your worst Christmas or something, that really that you remember that wasn't pleasant. And then I want you to think back to your very best Christmas that you can remember as a child and as an adult. And so it's, in thinking about Christmas, we think about families and those that are estranged from families, and that happens in the disease a lot of times. People are not speaking, or maybe you're speaking to a different group this year than you spoke to last year. So we just want to talk about a little bit about, is your Christmas healthier today than it was in the past? I'll tell you one of the Christmases that I remember growing up, and my folks didn't have much, and we lived in a little small 3-room house, and but I remember getting up on Christmas morning. This is one of my favorite memories, getting up on Christmas morning, and my sister and I would use one of my dad's socks. That was our stocking, was a sock of my dad's. We'd hang it up, and every year we'd get an apple and an orange ribbon candy, that hard ribbon candy. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Your older ones, you probably do know. It wouldn't be wrapped or anything. It'd just be stuck in there. And an apple and an orange, some kind of nuts, and a 50-cent piece. But that was a lot. I mean, and we were excited. And I remember one of the best Christmases growing up. I loved dolls. I loved dolls. But also I went through a phase of being a tomboy. Now, the thing about me being a tomboy, I had a horse named Dolly, and Dolly literally saved my life through the hardest times growing up. And, I rode barrels and rodeos until my dad made me stop because I'd gained so much weight. And I'd ride in the grand entries, and, those were good times with my dad. And, but my weight, he was very, very thin conscious, very body conscious. And so he made me quit riding in the riding barrels or riding in the, grand entry or any of that. But anyway, this was before that. And the only thing I wanted that Christmas was a doll, a certain kind of doll, and a BB gun and a hatchet, because we kind of lived out in the country, and I would go on, my mother she was already into her alcoholism, but, there'd be times that she would be sober, and that's when I'd go on those adventures by myself. Or the little boy down the road, his name was Johnny, and he was younger than me. And so we'd go out and we would be, go on an adventure, and I'd take my BB gun and my hatchet, and then we would ride Dolly, and his folks were pretty wealthy, and I knew it, so I would charge Johnny $0.25 a ride to ride Dolly. And so anyway, those are good memories, and that particular Christmas was a good memory, because I wanted that BB gun, but I also wanted a doll, and so I got both. And so that was a really good memory. But then there's those where, Mom would be sick with her alcoholism. That's when her folks would come around. Her sister, her brother-in-law, they all drank. And I remember one Christmas we all went out to the Sheriff's Posse Bar. It was an organization that my dad belonged to. It was called the Sheriff's Posse. And anyway, they had a big dance and all. And they'd take us kids. I mean, it wasn't a place for kids. But I remember, starting those evenings, excited and thinking it was going to be so much fun. But when you would mix the drug alcohol in with a party, and by toward evening, people would either be dancing on the table, or they'd be fighting, and they'd be something. And I remember my brother-in-law said the wrong thing to his wife, my aunt. My dad took a whiskey bottle and cracked it over his head. Now, keep in mind, by that time, my dad was a law enforcement officer, so he didn't arrest himself. He put my brother-in-law in jail, took him to jail with that cut on his head. So anyway, that's one of those Christmases that I don't pretend to, particularly like. And then we didn't know what was going to happen 2 days later at Christmas. Would the family come? Would the uncle get out of jail? That's what alcoholism does to families. It's unpredictable. You never know. So one of the things that when my husband and I had children, what happened with me, I made a decision that Christmas was going to be a big deal in our home. And I tried to make it as festive and as fun for our kids as I could. And, we were in the oil business and business for ourselves. And what that says is when the oil price was up and the oil business was good, we'd have a wonderful Christmas. What it wasn't, things would be pretty short, So I remember this Christmas, and my baby girl that's right here, Christy Kay, she was, I think, about 4 years old, and she had wanted this particular doll. And so I got the doll for her, and I had a friend. Actually, her husband worked for us down at McCarty Equipment, and so she was a great seamstress. And so I had her to make the doll clothes for this little doll. And came time to pick the doll clothes up. I had everything else. I had bought everything for dinner. Folks were coming to our house for Christmas dinner, and I had all of that, but we were broke. We didn't have a penny left, nothing, zero. I'd spent it all. I spent every penny he gave me, and probably went back for more. And that's one thing, my husband did a lot of good stuff. The longer my husband is gone, the more we have him up into sainthood. We can't remember one bad thing he ever did. And isn't that good? That's good, So I'll tell you what, we worked as partners. And, particularly around Christmas or any holiday, he was right in there with me because he didn't have much of a childhood and didn't, Christmas wasn't celebrated much. So it was important to both of us that our children had a good Christmas. So here I had everything, already spent all the money for dinner, I had all the gifts wrapped and, the things that were going under the tree, they were hidden. And then I remembered I hadn't picked up the doll clothes that this friend had made, and she was a wonderful seamstress. I knew they would be beautiful, and I didn't have the money to go get them. So who did I call? Not Ghostbusters. I called my husband because he could figure anything out. And bless his heart. I mean, we had no money at the business. I mean, we had money coming in, but it wouldn't be there till after the first of the year, So times were hard. The oil business was bad, and so I told him what the dilemma was, and of course he knew the woman. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll go get it." And I didn't find out till later. On in that week, I think, or sometime, I didn't know at the time. But my husband, I want to cry, but anyway, my husband collected coins, and he had a great coin collection. And he had a collection of dimes, old dimes. He took that the dime collection, took it to the bank and I guess that's what he did. I'm sure he took that dime collection and got the doll clothes for my baby girl's doll. And here's the doll. Here's the doll, and here's the doll clothes. And Christy always took such good care of everything. And the woman even made a little blanket. She made it all. And so Santa Claus did good that year. I mean, Santa Claus did good every year. And Christy can remember that, yes. And but Christy always took care of everything, and so her toys they're not quite vintage. I don't know. They're 50 years old. Is that what vintage is? Maybe over. No, they're older than 50 years old. Not telling your age, Christy. But anyway, we had some wonderful Christmases, and then we had some and I don't know that the kids ever knew because I hid my husband's alcoholism from them. They did not grow up in a house where there was any alcohol. So my husband did his drinking outside the home for many, many, many years. They never saw him take a drink, probably until their teenage years. And because I went to great lengths to present us well to the community, we looked good out in the community. I dressed those kids to I'd take them to church and people would say, "Oh, they are just beautiful." I mean, they're dressed so nice every Sunday. How do you do it? Well, that's what I lived for, was to hear those compliments. At that time, I weighed probably 260 pounds. I had one old dress that I wore every Sunday to church because I kept thinking I was going to lose weight and I wasn't going to buy me anything else till I lost weight. But my kids always looked good, and that's how I got my good feelings about myself, was through my children. So, but talking about Christmases past, we went to great lengths to make holidays good for our kids. I think my husband and I both wanted to make up for our own childhoods, and we had an all-inclusive at our home. We would invite anyone that didn't have a place to go, particularly on Thanksgiving, and sometimes on Christmas, but mainly Thanksgiving. And so we would have a good celebration, and that there would be times, and I can feel the pain. We would have toys to put together and, things to do on Christmas Eve to get ready for the next day. And for some reason or other, alcoholics love to drink on Christmas Eve. particularly those in the oil business. Is that right, Jeff? And he would be closing at noon on Christmas Eve, but I knew he wouldn't be home at noon because they would go up and down South Treadway. That's what we call Industrial Boulevard, which is all the different oil companies, and everyone would go by and take a bottle and take a drink and, take a bottle and take another drink. And by the time he got home, these wonderful, you talk about having visions in my head of how wonderful Christmas was going to be. He'd come home drunk. But I'd have plans made, and, he'd sober up enough for us to go around and look at Christmas lights. And I went to great lengths to cover all of that up for my kids. I don't know if they ever knew or not. But anyway, those are the Christmases that I grew up with, and the Christmas that I talked about with getting the BB gun and the doll. That was one of the best Christmases. My mother's alcoholism started to decline after that. My sister left home when she was 16, I was 13, and I pretty much was in charge of the household by then. And I loved Christmas, and Mother just gave me some money, and I drove by then. I'd been driving since I was 10. But I'd go, I remember that year I went and got a Christmas tree. You know how hard it is to put a live Christmas tree in a Christmas tree stand when you are 13 years old? But I got it done. And I was, 13. I wasn't just real bright about it. Anyway, I went and bought Christmas decorations at the dime store, World's Worth. And I got a can of red snow. Can you imagine? Red's my favorite color. They just come out with that spray snow. So I got a can of red. I got that tree decorated. Mother was laying on the couch watching me. She never said a word. She never said, you might not want to spray that red snow in here. She didn't. She just laid there and watched me. And I got after that spray, and I sprayed it all over that Christmas tree. And it got on the decorations and all that, but it just looked gorgeous to me because I love red. And then when we took the tree down, guess what? We had red walls behind us. I had to scrape that snow off, and then it was, kind of a dark pink for a long time. But anyway, I'm feeling sorry for myself right now, but anyway, I made Christmas how I envisioned Christmas to be. Because when you particularly have an alcoholic mom, if the dad is alcoholic, the mother learns to kind of work around the alcoholism. But if you have an alcoholic mother, and my mother was, my mother was sick, she was not sorry. Alcoholics are not sorry. They might do some sorry stuff, but they're not. They're not bad people need to get good. They're sick people need to get well. And the things that would happen, around Christmas was not always fun. And I made a decision that when I grew up, things were going to be different. And I wasn't going to marry an alcoholic. And I didn't. I married me two of them. The first marriage didn't last long, so I found me another one, and I didn't even know that he had a drinking problem until we were on our honeymoon. And that something is kind of sick when you go on a honeymoon and you have a choice to go to Arizona and visit his kids that's living with his mother. That was one choice. Or we could go to Galveston with my mother and dad. We needed to take her to the clinic down at Galveston. And so, of course, we always went and took Mother to the clinic. So that was our honeymoon, and we all stayed in this big old rooming boarding house close to the hospital. And anyway, that's when I discovered my husband was an alcoholic. We went out one night, my aunt was there, and she was a partier, and we all went dancing. They danced I didn't dance. I was, I was Miss codependent then, and I was sitting back judging them and all. But anyway, he got drunk. We got back to that boarding house, and I don't know why I'm telling this, but anyway, I had a horror of false teeth. I did not like false. I would do a lot of things for my mother, but I would not wash her false teeth. I couldn't. I had a phobia about false teeth. So my husband, we got back to our room. He got sick from being drunk, and he threw up, his false teeth. That's the way I learned that he had false teeth. So we had some doozies of Christmases. And his son, who grew up with me, we were like, I was barely 19 when my husband and I married, and his son was 9. I was 10 years older. So we grew up together. He lived with us and then his 2 daughters joined us. But anyway, and then I had a little baby. I had my son, Kelly. So anyway, that was our start of me finding out that he had false teeth. I hadn't intended to tell that story. But what I wanted to hear from y'all today is, it is winding down it is getting close to the birthday of Jesus. And that's why we celebrate. And I feel like I have already had my Christmas season. Misty was invited up to Illinois to her sister-in-law's church. It's looks like a huge church up there. I've spoken up there before. Anyway, she was invited to go up and sing in their annual concert, and she was the main singer. And one thing, she looked absolutely gorgeous, and they sounded, and I'm embarrassed her, she's hiding over here in the corner, but she did a marvelous job. And so it was the most beautiful, and I've heard a lot of Christmas concerts, but it was one of the most beautiful, most well put together. It was humorous, it was funny, it was serious. You would cry, you would laugh, you would worship. It was a wonderful, so I feel like I've already had my Christmas watching that. And so if you have an opportunity to see a Christmas concert during these times, I would encourage you to do that, or do whatever you do as far as worshiping the God of your understanding. Don't forget, you've heard this, the reason for the season. Sometimes we get so busy we leave, the Jesus out. And I have a December birthday. I just had a birthday, and I want to thank all of you. And I've already been thanking people. That was the most wonderful. I've had some marvelous birthdays. My children do not neglect me at all, anytime, but particularly on my birthday. And a lot of it is because of that woman right there, Christy Kay. She is always the one that comes up with ideas. She doesn't think I know that, but I know that. She gets her brothers and sisters on board. They gave me a surprise 70th birthday party. There's probably 200 people there from all across the United States. And then they repeated it on my 80th. And there again, another about 200 people there, and it's all because of that young woman right there. And the ones that couldn't show up, I got, and I'm not bragging, I'm just saying people just have really, during this season too, this birthday season, I've gotten enough flowers, I could open my own florist. Y'all need some flowers? I've just got gorgeous flowers here. And I've got so many calls and texts from so many people like you, and I just want to thank all of you for acknowledging my birthday. I'll go back to my childhood. Alcoholics would do better if they could. My mother would have done better if she could have. Her illness kept her from doing what she wanted to do as a mother and a grandmother. My children didn't have an active grandmother. They had two grandmothers, but they never had an active grandmother or grandparents. So that's why I guess my husband and I kind of overdid for them. We tried to give them as good a Christmases as we could. And a lot of it depended on the oil business. The oil business was good, boy, they had a good Christmas. Oil business not so good, they still had a good Christmas, but maybe they didn't get all those new cars or whatever they had on their list. I don't know, I'm joking. But anyway, what I'd like for us to talk about is confronting those Christmases of the past, those that maybe haunt you if you've lived in dysfunction. And if you didn't, I applaud that. If you didn't live in dysfunction, don't feel left out. Just rejoice and be grateful that you didn't live in the disease of alcoholism or dysfunction. My mother, bless her heart, she was then more of a pill taker. She started taking Miltowns, and it's the early day Valium. It's strong medication. She started doing that when I was about 4. And then as soon as Valium came along, that was her drug of choice. And so Valium, the body doesn't know the difference between Valium and a shot of scotch. It does the same thing to the body. So she was drinking along with taking pills. So my mother got sick at a pretty young age for me. And it really peaked after my sister got married at 16. So Mother and I spent a lot of Christmases me being the mom and doing, the shopping and all of that. I don't regret any of that. I just regret it for her. So tell me about your Christmases. Tell me about maybe your Christmas past that stands out in your mind that you feel a lot of joy over. And maybe if you have one that was what I call a drunk Christmas. I don't know if y'all had drunk Christmases or if you lived with a rager. My kids got a double whammy. Their father was alcoholic and their mother was a rager, and I was very much a compulsive overeater. I would try baking those Christmas cookies, and I'd bake them. And then I would eat the first batch, and then I'd have to make another batch because the smell would be in the house. Or I'd run down to the bakery and get more before the kids got home because the smell of the cookies make it. And I became a liar through my compulsive overeating. We don't tell the truth when we're overeating or drinking or using any kind of substance. We will do anything to cover our butt, excuse my language, but we'll do anything to make ourselves look good or to cover up, So that's what I have about, talking about maybe grieving the Christmas that you never had, that maybe you had in your mind, or maybe you had wonderful Christmases. And I know some of you have wonderful Christmases today. And so let's talk about that. Maybe a Christmas of the past that sticks out to you, or as, really dysfunctional, or maybe a Christmas that stands out in your mind as a child that was magical. So who wants to talk about your Christmases in the past? Sally, talk about your